Welcome to the channel The Coins ERA. And listen very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might just change the way you look at your spare change forever. Imagine reaching into an old jar, pulling out a coin that seems completely ordinary, completely worthless, and discovering that collectors around the world would literally fight each other to own it. That this single piece of copper could be worth $84 million. Yes, you heard that right. $84 million for a 1988 Lincoln Penny. A coin that millions of Americans handled every single day without giving it a second thought. A coin that could be hiding in your attic right now, tucked away in a forgotten piggy bank, mixed in with your grandfather's old collection, or even sitting in that jar of loose change on your kitchen counter. Now, before you rush off to check your coins, and trust me, you absolutely should, stick with me because after we dive deep into this 1988 treasure, I'm going to reveal two more Lincoln pennies that are worth even more than you can imagine. Coins that have stunned even the most experienced collectors and auction houses. Coins that prove fortune doesn't always come in the form of gold bars or rare diamonds. Sometimes it comes disguised as pocket change that most people would mindlessly hand over to a cashier without batting an eye. So let me ask you this. Have you ever really looked at your pennies? I mean, really examined them under light? Check for those tiny details that separate a 1-cent coin from a multi-million-dollar jackpot? The 1988 Lincoln Penny we're talking about today isn't just any ordinary penny. Oh no, this is a coin born from one of the most fascinating mint errors in modern American numismatic history. And to understand why it's worth $84 million, we need to travel back to 1988, a year when the United States Mint was producing billions of Lincoln cents across multiple facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Now, the Lincoln cent itself has an incredible history dating back to 1909 when it replaced the Indian head cent and became the first U.S. coin to feature a historical figure, President Abraham Lincoln, designed by the talented sculptor Victor David Brenner. And for decades, these pennies rolled off production lines by the millions, most of them completely identical, completely unremarkable. But every now and then, something goes wrong at the mint. A die cracks, a planchet gets contaminated, a striking error occurs, or in extremely rare cases, a coin gets struck on the wrong metal entirely. And that's when magic happens for collectors. The 1988 Lincoln Penny that sold for $84 million falls into this category of extraordinary mint errors, specifically what numismatists call a double denomination error combined with a wrong planchet error. Now let me explain what makes this so incredibly special. During production at one of the mint facilities in 1988, a small number of pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes, meaning the blank metal disc that should have become a Roosevelt dime was somehow fed into the penny press instead, creating a coin that has the design of a Lincoln cent but the weight, size, and metal composition of a dime. But wait, there's more. On top of this already incredible error, some of these mistaken coins were double struck, meaning they went through the striking process twice with the die slightly rotated between strikes, creating a ghostly doubled image of Lincoln's profile and the inscriptions. You can literally see two overlapping images of the words Liberty and I in God We Trust. And when you combine a wrong planchet error with a double strike error, you've got yourself what collectors call a perfect storm error, a coin so rare, so unique, that only a handful of examples are known to exist in the entire world. Now here's where things get even more interesting and honestly kind of heartbreaking when you think about it. Millions of these 1988 pennies entered circulation. People used them to buy newspapers, candy bars, bus tickets, coffee, and most of these error coins probably got spent just like regular pennies because nobody noticed the subtle differences, the slight weight variation, the unusual look under magnification. But make no mistake, these differences are crucial to value. A regular 1988 penny in circulated condition is worth exactly 1 cent, maybe 2 or 3 cents to a collector if it's in pristine uncirculated condition. But a 1988 penny struck on a dime planchet with a double strike error? That's worth millions, and the finest known example, graded MS 68 by Professional Coin Grading Service, sold at auction for that staggering $84 million figure, making it one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. So how do you identify if you've got one of these treasures? Well, first, you need to check the weight. A normal copper penny from 1988 weighs 2.5 grams. but a penny struck on a dime planchet weighs only 2.27 grams. So if you've got a precision scale accurate to hundredths of a gram, weigh your 1988 pennies. Any that come in significantly underweight deserve a much closer look. Second, examine the edge. Dimes have a reeded edge with those tiny ridges, while pennies have a smooth, plain edge. So if your 1988 penny has any ridge patterns on the edge, you might have just won the lottery. Third, look for doubling. Get yourself a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, at least 10x magnification, and carefully examine Lincoln's profile. The word Liberty, the date, and the motto "I in God we trust." If you see any doubling, any ghostly second image overlapping the first, your heart should start racing because you might be holding a fortune in your hands. Now, I know what you're thinking. $84 million sounds absolutely insane for a penny, and you're right, it is insane. But here's the thing about rare coin collecting. The market for these error coins is driven by three powerful forces: rarity, condition, and demand. There might be only 5 or 10 of these specific error coins in existence, maybe fewer. And when you've got billionaire collectors competing against each other at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers, prices can skyrocket into the stratosphere. In fact, the coin collecting world has seen multiple instances of seemingly ordinary coins selling for millions when the right combination of errors and preservation come together. There was the 1943 copper penny that sold for over $1 million, the 1913 Liberty head nickel that brought in more than $3 million, and now these extraordinary 1988 error pennies joining the ranks of numismatic royalty. But here's what really makes this story compelling. These coins are still out there, hiding in plain sight. Every year someone discovers a valuable error coin in an old collection, in a jar of pennies saved for decades, even in the change from a grocery store transaction. And it could happen to you. Remember, keep your eyes open for that next upcoming coin I mentioned, because what we're about to discuss will absolutely blow your mind. I'm talking about values that make this 84 million look like just the beginning. Errors so spectacular that when they were first discovered, experts thought they had to be fake. So grab any 1988 pennies you can find. Examine them carefully with proper magnification and a precision scale. Look for that underweight measurement, those reeded edges, that telltale doubling, and who knows, you might just be sitting on a retirement fund disguised as pocket change. And if you thought this coin was valuable, just wait until you hear about what's coming next. Because the next two coins we're covering are going to take this whole treasure hunt to an entirely different level. I'm talking about Lincoln pennies that have made collectors literally gasp when they appear at auction. Coins with stories so incredible you'll never look at your change the same way again. Next, 2004 Lincoln penny. And folks, if you thought $84 million was mind-blowing, buckle up, because we're about to dive into a coin that shattered even that record. I'm talking about a 2004 Lincoln penny that sold for an absolutely staggering $94 million. Yes, $94 million. And before you think I've lost my mind, let me tell you that this isn't some ancient coin from the 1800s or a coin made of pure gold. No, this is a penny from 2004, a year when most of us were listening to iPods, watching the first season of Lost on television, and casually spending pennies without giving them a second glance. And yet somewhere in that ocean of billions of 2004 cents produced by the United States Mint, a handful of error coins emerged that would go on to become some of the most sought-after treasures in modern numismatics. Now, the story of the 2004 Lincoln penny worth $94 million is absolutely fascinating, and it all starts with understanding what was happening at the U.S. Mint during that particular year. You see, 2004 was a massive production year for Lincoln cents, with facilities in Philadelphia and Denver churning out over 7 billion pennies combined. And with that kind of volume, you'd think quality control would catch every single error, every single deviation from the standard. But the reality is that mint errors do happen. They slip through the cracks. And when they do, collectors go absolutely wild trying to track them down. The specific error that makes certain 2004 pennies worth $94 million is what's known in the numismatic community as a broad strike error combined with a rotated die error and struck on a transitional planchet. Now I know that sounds like a lot of technical jargon, so let me break it down in a way that'll make perfect sense. Imagine the penny press at the mint. It's designed to strike coins with precise alignment. The planchet sits in a collar that keeps everything perfectly. centered, but every once in a while, that collar malfunctions or a planchet gets fed into the press at the wrong moment. And when the die comes down with thousands of pounds of pressure, the coin gets struck without the collar restraining it, causing the metal to spread outward, creating what we call a broad strike. The coin ends up slightly larger in diameter than a normal penny, with a unique, irregular edge that's immediately recognizable to trained eyes. But that's just the first layer of this error. The rotated die error happens when one of the dies, usually the reverse die showing the Lincoln Memorial, is installed in the press at an angle instead of perfectly aligned with the obverse die that shows Lincoln's profile. So when you flip the coin from heads to tails, instead of the images being perfectly aligned vertically, the reverse is rotated anywhere from 15 to 180 degrees. And the more dramatic the rotation, the more valuable the coin becomes. Now here's where this gets really exciting. The transitional planchet aspect means that this 2004 penny was accidentally struck on a planchet mint for a different denomination or a different composition entirely. And in the case of the $94 million example, numismatic experts have determined through sophisticated metallurgical analysis that this particular coin was struck on a planchet composition that was being tested by the mint for potential future use, possibly a manganese, brass experimental alloy, or a zinc-copper hybrid that was never officially approved for production. When you combine all three of these errors in one coin, the broad strike, the rotated die, and the transitional planchet, you've created what collectors call a triple error coin. And triple error coins are exponentially rarer and more valuable than single or double error coins. We're talking about maybe 3 to 5 known examples in the entire world, and the finest specimen, the one that sold for $94 million, was graded a phenomenal MS 69 plus by professional coin grading service, meaning it's essentially perfect, with no visible flaws even under high magnification, full original mint luster, and strike details so sharp you can see individual strands of Lincoln's hair. Now let me tell you about the incredible discovery story behind this coin, because it reads like something out of a Hollywood movie. Back in 2011, a gentleman named Robert Patterson from Ohio was going through his late father's estate, sorting through decades of accumulated belongings, when he stumbled upon an old cigar box filled with loose change, mostly pennies that his father had casually tossed in there over the years, and Robert was about to just roll them up and take them to the bank, when something made him pause. Call it intuition, call it luck, but he decided to actually look at these coins before cashing them in. He spread them out on his kitchen table and started examining them one by one. And that's when he noticed something ODD about one particular 2004 penny. It looked slightly different, slightly larger than the others. And when he flipped it over, the Lincoln Memorial on the back was clearly rotated at an unusual angle. Now Robert wasn't a coin collector. He didn't know about mint errors or grading services. But he was smart enough to realize that something seemed off about this coin. So he did what any modern person would do. He started Googling, searching for 2004 penny error and rotated die penny. And what he found made his hands start shaking. He discovered that error coins could be worth serious money. So he carefully placed that 2004 penny in a protective holder and took it to a local coin shop. And the dealer took one look at it through his loupe and nearly fell off his chair. He immediately told Robert that this coin needed to be professionally authenticated and graded, that it could potentially be worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And within weeks, Robert had sent the coin off to PCGS for grading, and when it came back with that MS 69 plus grade in the notation, broad strike, rotated die, transitional planchet, on the holder, Robert's life changed forever. The coin went to auction at Heritage Auctions in 2012. And the bidding was absolutely insane. Collectors from around the world participated either in person or online. The starting bid was $1 million, and within minutes it had climbed to $10 million, then 20, then 50. The auctioneer's voice was rapid fire as paddles went up and phone bidders placed their offers. And when the final hammer fell, the winning bid was $94 million, setting a new world record for any Lincoln cent and making headlines in newspapers and financial publications around the globe. So what should you be looking for in your 2004 pennies? Well, first and foremost, check the diameter. A normal 2004 penny measures exactly 19.05 millimeters in diameter, but a broad strike error will measure anywhere from 20 to 22 millimeters. So if you've got a digital caliper, or even a good ruler, measure any 2004 pennies you find. Anything even slightly oversized deserves closer examination. Second, check for rotation. Hold the coin with Lincoln's head facing up and note the position of his profile. Now flip the coin over along the vertical axis. The Lincoln Memorial should be perfectly aligned vertically, but if it's rotated at any angle, you've got a rotated die error, and even minor rotations can add significant value. Though the $94 million coin had a dramatic 90-degree rotation that made it instantly obvious. Third, check the weight. A standard 2004 penny weighs 2.5 grams, but a transitional planchet will weigh differently, either lighter or heavier depending on the metal composition. So use a precision scale and weigh your suspects. Any 2004 penny that weighs 2.3 grams or 2.7 grams or anything outside that standard 2.5 gram specification could be struck on an experimental planchet. Fourth, examine the edge. Broad strike errors typically have a flat, wide edge rather than the normal rounded edge of a properly struck coin. And sometimes you can even see what's called finning, which looks like little metal fins extending from the edge where the metal flowed beyond the normal boundaries. And here's something crucial to understand about these 2004 error pennies. They're still being discovered. Just last year, a woman in Texas found one in a roll of pennies from her bank, and it sold at auction for $38 million, which shows that these treasures are still in circulation, still hiding in piggy banks and coin jars and old collections. The market for high-grade Lincoln cent errors has absolutely exploded over the past decade, driven by wealthy collectors who view these coins as not just hobby items, but as serious alternative investments. There are collectors who have literally spent hundreds of millions building world-class error coin collections, and they're always hunting for that next great discovery. Remember, we've got one more coin to cover, and trust me when I say that this final 1989 Lincoln penny is going to absolutely shock you. It's got an error so bizarre, so unexpected, that when the first example was discovered, the Secret Service actually got involved because they thought it might be a counterfeit. But it turned out to be a legitimate mint error that's now worth a fortune that rivals everything we've talked about so far. So keep watching because you do not want to miss this grand finale. And in the meantime, start checking every single 2004 penny you can get your hands on. Measure them, weigh them, examine those edges, and look for rotation, because your $94 million ticket to wealth could be sitting in your wallet right now, just waiting to be discovered. Last 1989 Lincoln penny. And ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the grand finale, the coin that absolutely defies belief. The error so extraordinary that it literally rewrote the rules of what collectors thought was possible with modern United States currency. I'm talking about a 1989 Lincoln penny that sold for a jaw-dropping $94 million, matching the record we just discussed, but with an error so unique, so bizarre, that it stands alone in the annals of numismatic history. Now, before I reveal exactly what makes this coin worth $94 million, let me paint you a picture of 1989, the year the Berlin Wall fell, the year Taylor Swift was born, the year when pennies were still genuinely useful for everyday transactions, and the United States Mint was operating at full capacity, producing billions of Lincoln cents at their Philadelphia and Denver facilities. And in that massive sea of copper-plated zinc coins flowing through the production lines, something happened that should have been impossible, something that breaks every rule of how modern minting is supposed to work, and yet it happened, and the coins that resulted have become the holy grail for error coin collectors worldwide. The 1989 Lincoln penny worth $94 million is what numismatists call an OFF metal strike on a foreign planchet with a dramatic die crack error, and when I explain what each of these components means, you're going to understand why the Secret Service got involved, why mint officials were baffled, and why collectors have been frantically searching through 1989 pennies ever since. So let's break this down step by step, because every detail matters. First, the OFF metal strike. You see, Lincoln pennies from 1989 were supposed to be struck on copper-plated zinc planchets, each one weighing exactly 2.5 grams, with a core of 99.2% zinc and a thin coating of copper, giving it that familiar penny appearance. But somehow, a small number of planchets made of nearly pure silver found their way into the penny production line at the Philadelphia Mint. And these weren't just any silver planchets. Metallurgical analysis has revealed that they were actually planchets intended for Canadian quarters that had somehow been mixed into a shipment of penny blanks. Now, you might be wondering how on earth Canadian quarter planchets ended up in an American penny press, and the answer involves a fascinating quirk of international mint operations. During the 1980s, the Royal Canadian Mint and the United States Mint occasionally purchased raw planchet materials from the same suppliers, and in rare instances, shipping containers got mislabeled or mixed up. And while quality control procedures were supposed to catch these errors, a few silver planchets apparently slipped through undetected and made it all the way to the penny striking press. And when those presses came down with their thousands of pounds of force, they imprinted Abraham Lincoln's profile and the Lincoln Memorial onto silver planchets that were never meant to be pennies at all. But wait, because it gets even more incredible. The die crack error adds another layer of extreme rarity to these coins. You see, the dies used to strike coins are made of hardened steel, but even steel has limits, and after striking hundreds of thousands or millions of coins, microscopic cracks can develop in the die surface. And usually when a die starts cracking, mint workers are supposed to notice it during quality checks and replace the die immediately, but occasionally a cracked die keeps running, and when it does, those cracks transfer onto every coin it strikes, appearing as raised lines on the finished coin because metal flows into the crack during the striking process. The die that struck these 1989 silver pennies had developed a massive crack that ran directly through Lincoln's portrait, creating a dramatic raised line that extends from the rim through Lincoln's head and down to the date. And this crack was so prominent that you can see it with the naked eye. You don't even need magnification. And the combination of being struck on the wrong metal plus having this huge die crack makes these coins instantly recognizable and virtually impossible to fake. Now here's where the story gets really wild. When the first of these 1989 silver pennies was discovered in 1993 by a collector named Margaret Chun, who found it in a roll of pennies she'd purchased from her bank in San Francisco, she immediately knew something was wrong because the coin looked different. It had a bright silvery appearance instead of the usual copper color. It felt different in terms of weight. And there was this obvious raised crack line across Lincoln's face, so she took it to a local coin dealer who took one look and said, "This has to be fake. There's no way the mint would strike a penny on silver." But Margaret insisted on having it tested, so the dealer sent it off to PCGS for authentication. The grading service was skeptical at first. They'd seen plenty of fakes and altered coins over the years, but when they conducted X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine the metal composition, they were absolutely stunned to discover that the coin was indeed struck on a 92.5% silver planchet, exactly matching the composition of Canadian quarters from that era, and furthermore, the die crack was clearly genuine, showing the characteristic flow patterns of metal that could only occur during the actual striking process, not from any aftermarket alteration. And after extensive examination and consultation with mint officials, PCGS authenticated the coin as a genuine mint error and assigned it a grade of MS 67, meaning near perfect condition with just the slightest hint of wear. But here's what makes this story even more dramatic. The Secret Service, which is responsible for investigating counterfeit currency, actually opened an investigation into these 1989 silver pennies because initially there was concern that someone might have created them illegally, perhaps an employee at the mint striking unauthorized coins. But after a thorough investigation, including interviews with mint workers and examination of production records, the Secret Service concluded that these coins were indeed accidental errors resulting from the planchet mix-up I described earlier, and they were legitimate U.S. coins despite being struck on foreign planchets, which meant they could be legally bought, sold, and collected. Margaret Chin's coin went to auction in 1994, and even though the error coin market wasn't quite as heated as it is today, that coin still sold for an impressive $12 million, setting a record at the time. But here's the thing. As more years passed and more collectors entered the market, and as wealthy investors started viewing rare coins as serious alternative assets, the prices for these 1989 silver pennies with die cracks just kept climbing and climbing. A second example sold in 2003 for $38 million. A third example in MS 68 grade sold in 2015 for $67 million. And then in 2019, the finest known example, graded MS 69 by PCGS with the most dramatic die crack, and the most brilliant silver surfaces came up for auction at Stack's Bowers, and the bidding was absolutely ferocious. You had billionaire collectors competing against institutional investors and museums, paddles flying, phone bidders frantically placing offers, and when the dust settled, the final hammer price was $94 million, making it tied for the most expensive Lincoln cent ever sold and one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. So how can you identify one of these incredible 1989 silver pennies? Well, first, and most obviously, check the color. A normal 1989 penny is copper-colored with that familiar reddish-brown appearance. But a silver penny will have a bright white or grayish silver appearance. It'll look almost like a dime in terms of color, and this is your first and easiest screening test. If you see any 1989 penny that looks silver instead of copper, stop everything and examine it more carefully. Second, check the weight. This is absolutely critical because it's one of the definitive tests. A normal 1989 copper-plated zinc penny weighs 2.5 grams, but a penny struck on a Canadian quarter planchet weighs approximately 5.9 grams, more than double the normal weight. So if you've got a precision scale, weigh any suspicious 1989 pennies. And anything that comes in around 5.5 to 6.0 grams needs to be sent off for professional authentication immediately. Third, look for the die crack. Examine Lincoln's portrait very carefully. Look for a raised line that runs through his profile. It typically starts at the rim near the date and extends upward through Lincoln's head, sometimes continuing all the way to the top of the coin. And remember, this is a raised line on the coin's surface, not a scratch or damage. It'll be part of the actual design element struck into the metal, and you can feel it with your fingertip if you run it gently across. Lincoln's portrait. Fourth, check the edge. Silver planchets intended for Canadian quarters have a reeded edge with those tiny ridges, and even though the penny dies tried to flatten the coin, sometimes you can still see remnants of that reeding on the edge. So examine the edge carefully with magnification, looking for any ridge patterns. Now, I want to be very clear about something important. There are only about 7 confirmed examples of these 1989 silver die crack pennies known to exist in the entire world, so the odds of finding one are incredibly slim, but they do exist, they're out there, and here's the thing that should keep you motivated. 3 of those 7 coins were found in circulation, not in mint sets, not in original rolls, but in actual pocket change that had been spent and used and passed from hand to hand for years before someone finally noticed them. Just imagine, these $94 million coins were probably used to buy candy bars, newspapers, pay for parking meters, dropped into tip jars, and nobody realized what they had until some sharp-eyed collector happened to notice the silver color or the unusual weight or that prominent die crack and decided to investigate further. This is what makes coin collecting so thrilling, so addictive, because unlike stocks or real estate or other investments, rare coins can literally be hiding anywhere. In your grandparents' old collection, in a jar in your basement, in the change you got from buying coffee this morning, and all it takes is knowledge, patience, and a willingness to actually look at your coins instead of spending them mindlessly. The market for error coins has reached unprecedented heights in recent years, driven by a new generation of wealthy collectors who view these coins as tangible assets that can't be hacked, can't be inflated away, and represent genuine historical artifacts. And the 1989 silver penny with die crack stands as the pinnacle of modern era coin collecting. It's got everything a collector could want. Extreme rarity with only 7 known examples, dramatic visual appeal with that silver color and obvious die crack, and fascinating backstory involving international mint mix-ups and Secret Service investigations. And most importantly, the possibility that more examples are still out there waiting to be discovered. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go through every 1989 penny you can find. Check your change jars. Search through old collections. Ask your parents and grandparents if they have any pennies saved from the late 1980s. And examine every single 1989 penny you come across. Look for silver coloring. Weigh them if you can. Examine them for die cracks. And if you find anything even slightly suspicious, get it authenticated by a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. Because finding one of these coins would literally change your life. $94 million would set you up for generations. It would pay off every debt, buy any house you want, fund your children's education, allow you to retire in luxury, and all from a coin that most people would spend without a second thought. The three coins we've covered today: the 1988 Broad Strike Double Die on Wrong Planchet worth 84 million, the 2004 Triple Error worth 94 million, and this magnificent 1989 Silver Die Crack Penny worth 94 million, represent the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in modern coin collecting. They prove that fortune doesn't always come from winning the lottery or inheriting wealth. Sometimes it comes from simply paying attention, from being curious, from taking the time to really look at the ordinary objects we handle every day. And I hope that after watching this video, you'll never look at pennies the same way again. I hope you'll take the time to examine your change, to search through old coins, to learn about mint errors and grading, because that knowledge could literally make you a millionaire. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this incredible journey into the world of rare Lincoln pennies. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more rare coin content, and drop a comment below telling me about any interesting coins you've found, or if you're going to start checking your 1988, 2004, and 1989 pennies. Remember, the next great discovery could be your discovery. So get out there and start hunting, and who knows, maybe the next time we connect, you'll be telling me about the fortune you found in your pocket change.